Thank you everybody for joining us. As many of you know, getting probably sick of me, but my name is Jennifer Hewins. I work in the admissions office at RISD. Today, this session is going to focus on one of the amazing resources available at RISD, the Edna Lawrence Nature Lab. And with me today, I have Benedict Gagliardi, who works in the Nature Lab. Benedict?
Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm the collections manager and staff biologist at the Nature Lab. And I've been working here for 8 years, and every day continues to amaze and surprise and delight me because it's such a wildly and vibrantly unique place on campus, or really anywhere at any college I've ever been to. So my plan is this will be my best attempt to represent the Nature Lab digitally, which is a very difficult thing to do because it's I think from its start, it has definitively been an interactive, hands-on, three-dimensional, real-world type of place. So I'll give you some sort of simulation of that as we kind of traverse our very varied website with all kinds of digital assets that I can kind of represent what the lab is like. But at your soonest availability, I entreat you to come visit the lab in person because it's a totally different experience. So I'm gonna share my screen. And I'm guessing that questions will come up at the end, but I don't know if yeah, okay. Keep your questions in mind and I'll get to them at the end. So just to start off with, the Nature Lab is, like I said, quite a unique place on campus. It's situated in the Waterman Building, which was the original RISD building when it was founded in 1877. The space is a beautiful, tall ceiling, brick building with old wooden cabinets, glass faced. It was originally the museum of the school when it was first established. Then it became the library, and then in 1937, it became the Nature Lab. And the way it became the Nature Lab was a woman named Edna Lawrence. She was a student at RISD. She graduated in 1920. She went off to explore the world a little bit, came back and started teaching here, but she didn't really have a classroom. She kind of wandered around wherever she could teach her classes. In 1937, they cleared out the space that is now the Nature Lab, and Edna filled it with all the treasures, the natural history artifacts and specimens that she had in her own personal collection that she used for teaching. And she filled the beautiful cabinets upstairs. I'll show you upstairs while I'm talking here. Here is the main space of the Nature Lab. So Edna founded it in 1937 with maybe 2 to 5,000 specimens, including bones and shells and pressed plants, a couple pieces of taxidermy, some cultural artifacts as well, some ceramic pots that she'd collected on her travels around the world. And she used it as an interesting teaching resource. She taught amongst many other classes nature drawing, and she really believed heavily in the inspiration that could come from hands-on access to authentic specimens. So that was her goal, was to put real specimens in students' hands, give them the ability to look closely, feel things, understand the heft and the way that light interacts with things by manipulating with their own hands. And she continued doing that. She grew the collection from when it started to when she retired almost 50 years later in the 1970s. It became a collection of something like 20 to 30,000 specimens. And now our holdings have somewhere approaching 100,000 specimens, and that is everything from many different types of taxidermied animals, that's including bears and lions and swans and all kinds of things like that. Sea life, insects in handmade glass boxes. Here's a small, small representation of some of the types of specimens we have here. We have an extensive mineral and crystal collection. Um, just wondrous cabinets full of alluring and unique, authentic pieces of nature. And when you come into the nature lab, it is easy to walk in, look around, and say to yourself, "Oh, RISD has a natural history museum." And in a way, that's true. It is a collection of natural history objects, but it functions very, very differently. So we like to think of ourselves more as an artist reference collection for natural inspiration rather than a museum itself. One of the big things that sets us apart is we allow the rules of touch and interaction to be broken. So all of these cabinets here, and I might actually, uh, all the cabinets can be opened. And Jennifer, if you cannot see the Flickr page, let me know because I know that it sometimes becomes disconnected. Are you seeing the Flickr page right now?
I am seeing the Flickr page. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So I could give you guys a little bit of a representation of what the cabinets look like here. So we have I don't even know how many cabinets of specimens that we have, but they are generally organized into different groups. We have bird cabinets, we have rock and mineral, we have fossils, we have plants, we have shells, hundreds and thousands of shells. And so they are generally grouped into the same cabinets, but we're not overly scientific or taxonomic about it. So we don't have, this is the gastropod shelf, this is the perching bird shelf. They're all kind of mixed into each other because the idea is we want it to be as uh, accessible to everyone, no matter what your background is. So we want people to be able to window shop for form and hue and pattern if that's what they're after, or come in with a design question and say, how does nature deal with living in wet environments? And maybe we can connect you with a specimen that has solved that issue that you can learn from. So it's many different ways of engaging with the collection here. So that's what our main space upstairs looks like. And another thing that sets us apart from a museum is that we can actually check things out like library books. So we regularly circulate specimens, shells and seed pods and butterflies and all kinds of stuff like that. There's a good number of things that are checkoutable, but we run on the red dot system. If the specimen has a red dot on it, then it stays in-house. It can't be taken out of the building, but it can be used in the building. And with nearly 100,000 specimens to choose from, there's plenty of availability of checkoutable specimens. Um, it's also worth noting that we're a small staff here, but we are also greatly aided by our student undergraduate and graduate employees. So upstairs, we have probably about 30 undergraduates who give tours and orientations to class. They help out with animal care. We have live animals, two large 150-gallon saltwater aquaria full of marine animals native to Narragansett Bay, as well as upstairs we have a snake, a tortoise, a leopard gecko, an axolotl, a native seahorse, and a whole slew of other things, as well as you could see in this photo a pretty bountiful collection of live plants as well. So students help take care of those. They also help maintain the collection itself and keep it from um, becoming broken down by pests and damage and all kinds of things like that. So they're partial docents and they're partial animal care providers and they're partial museum assistants as well. When Edna Lawrence retired in the 1970s, one of the things that she expressed most strongly is that she wished that the nature lab had microscopes so students can look at nature at a finer grain scale. Downstairs, we now have a state-of-the-art microscopy and advanced imaging lab. Many of the pieces of equipment here were funded by National Science Foundation grant funding, which is pretty spectacular for an art design school. We're, I think, one of the few that has things like research grade stereo microscopes, macro photography systems, high resolution 3D scanners, and even a desktop scanning electron microscope that goes up to 350,000 times magnification, which are stupendous tools that would most stereotypically be categorized under scientific tools, tools of scientific inquiry that you it would be easy to think these aren't the types of tools that an illustrator or a painter or a sculptor or a glass artist might be interested in. But I think the Nature Lab stands as a shining example of these are all just tools, and we'd like to make them accessible and in the hands of as diverse a range of disciplines as we possibly can. So in this representative picture, you could see some folks going through our insect collection, taking macro photographs with our, it's called the macro pod, which uses stacked focus stacking imagery to make these beautiful images that you can enhance on the screen, and they retain clarity. In the back here, there's some folks probably 3D scanning a specimen on the wall here, and I'll go into some of these images so you could see them closer up. We have some representative scanning electron micrographs of diatoms and fabulously tiny things. And we have a whole classroom worth of stereo microscopes. So we can teach a whole class at once how to use microscopes in this uh, old-fashioned piece of equipment over here. It's a card catalog, but it's been reformatted into something that we call Tiny Town, and it holds actually, let's see, collections. Tiny Town houses a bunch of these little plexi boxes with a specimen inside, and they're perfect for popping under the microscope and being able to see the the close-up structures of a seed pod, or how do I get out of this? Let's see, here's a cactus. Even these images are a little old at this point. Our technology enhances at a rapid rate, so we have great macro photographs of this that I think envy the quality of the photos that I'm showing you right now. But this is just to say we have a huge collection of small things that again give you a wide array of form and pattern and structure and texture, and as well as life history and biology to explore and learn from. We also have a collection of pre-made microscope slides. So these would be embryological specimens, tissue samples, cellular details. These would be viewed at a couple hundred times magnification with compound microscopes. Here's a brain slice. Um, and then we have going to the highest level. And I have to say, coming from a scientific background, my background's in entomology. So I studied insects and I used scanning electron microscopes, which are normally a massive piece of equipment that takes up their own room in their own department in their own building. We have a desktop scanning electron microscope, which allows you to zoom into 350,000 times magnification. So this is part of an insect. I would guess it is a butterfly based on these structures here. These are scales. They're the flattened, specialized hairs that to our fingers feel like powder when we touch a butterfly or moth wing. It really lets you contemplate the world and all of its intricacies at a fine grain level. Um, let's see, let me just bump back to here. So we have the main collection, we have the microscope and imaging lab, and we also have a third space that we call the biodesign maker space. It's a really interesting room. It used to just be we called it our wet lab because it housed our two saltwater aquaria that have, you can kind of see there's a sea star gripped onto the glass there saying hello, and our I think locally famous tank of moon jellies that circulate in the window here. We often find people kind of ogling them from the window. Um, but it was this room was redesigned in 2018 by a class taught here, co-taught by our now director Jen Bissonette. It was a biodesign class that looked at this room, which used to be very standard lighting, very rectilinear tables, and pretty bland. And now it has very natural shaped and patterned tables. All the sharp edges are kind of gone. There's more movement. And all the materials that were used to build out this room are much more sustainable and environmentally friendly. Down to the wood that was used, the finish is a polyway instead of a polyurethane. So it's a made of some byproducts of the dairy industry. Um, this tank that you see in the foreground here is actually part of an aquaponic system. So basically, it's attached to. I wish you guys were here in the room right now. It'd be so much easier to point to these things. Imagine under here, it's attached to a grow bed over here. So we have fish in this tank. We feed them. They produce waste. There's bacteria in the system that break down the fish waste into nitrate. And on the other side of this feature, there's a grow bed of plants that uptake the nitrate and grow. So it's a compact microcosm of a natural aquatic system that we can replicate in the built environment, both for intrigue and beauty, but also to demonstrate that you can grow your own food in a pretty compact area, and especially in a an urban food desert like most cities are. So a lot of the things that are built into this room are based on principles like, human beings don't like to have harsh light shine down upon them all hours of the day. We are still accustomed to seeking refuge under the shade of trees and canopies and stuff. So this lighting up here was actually made by a grad student and an undergrad. They made the paper. They iterated out of the paper pulp out of invasive plants, including um, Phragmites and Japanese knotweed. So the effect of this lighting system is more dappled light that gives you a sense of ease rather than a sense of in danger of sunburn and being seen by predators out in the open. So there's a psychological level to this type of design, this biophilic design of incorporating nature in the built environment. What you can't see in this image is off to the right. I wonder, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to RISD Nature Lab. Oh, we have a lovely, yes, this is what it looks like, a plant wall against the side. That it was actually installed to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Nature Lab, but now it is a standing structure of representing biophilic design, and it allows everyone a sigh of relief when they walk into this room. Let's see. I'm going to jump over to our equipment page, and I should say there is so much to explore on our website. I invite you to poke around and see what you can discover. Um, we try to make as much of what we do available for reference from afar as possible. And one of the ways we've done that is the digital collections that we've developed. So, um, let me just go. I'm going to go to the equipment page, show you really quick. In addition to being able to check out specimens, we have all kinds of advanced imaging equipment, specialized things. So we we have things that are cameras and video cameras, but mostly we have things that are not the type of technology you could rent from media resources. So we have slow motion cameras and high um, macro photography systems and things like that, which are all listed out here. Some things can be checked out. We also maintain a bunch of field equipment because we like to encourage students to experience nature for themselves. So whether that's wading through a salt marsh here in Rhode Island or going to collect some plankton in the canal that runs through Providence, we have a bunch of field equipment that could be checked out for engaging with the natural world right here at home safely. Let's see. Um, let me show you some representative images. So we have a Flickr page and this Sketchfab page. Whoopsies. Is our 3D collection. So Flickr on here you could find some albums that represent some of the technology that we have, like the macropod and the SEM, or just collections of thematic interests like insects or plants or birds. So let me show you what our macropod can do. Um, this this is a great uh, comparison to microscope images, which I can show you those too. When you take an image through a microscope, you can zoom into a very high level. So these here are um, moth eggs that were laid on, I think, a piece of celery. Yeah. Um, and this is probably at maybe a hundred or so times magnified. So the microscope is more like a set of binoculars. It's an active looking experience. It shouldn't be thought of as a camera so much, but you can take images with the ones that we have here. When you zoom into these images themselves, they don't really retain sharp clarity. So you kind of you have the benefit of being able to actively look at things highly magnified, but not the benefit of being able to capture them and zoom them in any farther. However, with our macropod, let's see if I can find something comparative. Well, this is a favorite of mine. This is a little tiny local butterfly called a white M hair streak. It's maybe that big. And it's a great representative of the fact that we see some patterns in nature like structural color, very beautiful blue and green iridescences. And it's easy to think of those as a tropical phenomenon, mostly happening towards the equator, whereas temperate zones like us have more mundane things. That's not true at all, especially not so when you look at nature at a finer grain scale. So this tiny butterfly has the same iridescent scales that you would find in one of the giant blue tropical morpho butterflies. And this image was taken with our macro photography system that allows for every part of the image to be sharply resolved. So the image itself becomes sort of a microscope. So it's great for um, taking the image somewhere else and sharing the experience of looking at things zoomed in. Let's see, I'll go back one more time and I'll show a couple other things, but I'll leave plenty of time for other questions at the end. What was it that I wanted? Oh, that's right. Oops. So things bouncing around on my screen. There we go. The other sort of digitized library that we've developed is our 3D scan library. So we have, I think, still one of the highest resolution 3D scanners at RISD, maybe even in Providence, who knows? And we've used it to make sort of a remotely accessible represent representative library of our specimens. So show you guys the quality that you get with this particular scanner. This is actually a very giant, wild looking mollusk. It's called a spider conch. And it really it resolves to a very fine detailed level. So all of our all of our online resources are publicly viewable and downloadable. They're all licensed under Creative Commons. We want people to explore and use these things, learn from them, and share them. So um, no matter what the future brings, you can always experience what the Nature Lab has to share through these resources. I can't even imagine how many little tiny nature labs are 3D printed around the world now that these resources are available to everyone. So I invite you to poke around here. Maybe you'll find some things that you recognize. The thing I'm a very big advocate of there's nothing that replaces the experience that you have with an authentic specimen. So I could tell you that this seahorse is 2 inches long or 2 feet long, and you wouldn't be able to get any context from this very, very well scanned representation of it. So there's a lot that's lost with purely digitized versions of the real thing, but a lot can be gained and experimented with as well. So they go hand in hand, they complement each other. let's see. With that, Jen, what do you think about opening it up for some questions before I blabble all the time away?
Yes, let's definitely do that. We had somebody who was very excited in the chat about biophilic design.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome. But yes, anybody please type your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. We're happy to answer anything that you have at this time. Um, Absolutely anything. There's no wrong question, and somebody probably has the same question as you. So feel free to start throwing them in the chat. These can be anything from how your program fits into what the Nature Lab does, or how you can work in the late Nature Lab, or use some of these resources here. So feel free to start typing them in now.
And yes to biophilic design.
Yay.
I think there's a lot of sort of overarching themes that are bio something at RISD right now, especially at the Nature Lab. Bio-inspired design or biomimicry, biomimetic design is basically looking to nature's 3.8 billion years of research and development in solving all the problems that life presents and finding the answers that are already out there. So those are um, the foundational topics of a lot of programming classes, partnerships that are going on with the Nature Lab kind of at the core of it.
Okay. All right. We got a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Cool.
Is there a way to use the Nature Lab to collaborate with Brown students as well?
Yeah, so we are open to RISD and Brown. We're actually open to the public too. We try to be as accessible as possible. Um, there's all of our resources are accessible, and so any collaboration and use is possible. There's certain things like we can't check specimens out to Brown students, and we can't hire Brown students for assistantships, but everything is still available to either school. There's also some dual degree majors, so I think in that case, if you're registered as a RISD student and a Brown student in a dual degree fashion, then there's more possibilities for assistantships and things like that open up.
Thank you. Let's see here. Do architects use the Nature Lab often?
Yeah, I can confidently say that every department at RISD uses the Nature Lab in some way. I I think there are trends of um, wanting to design in a less damaging way overall to the environment, and there's so many ways to learn from nature by looking at actual parts of it closely, even as jumping off points. One of the things that I always say about the collection is when you walk in and you see students in there and you think about how the Nature Lab was founded, it's easy to limit your understanding of what it's all about to fine arts. You see people learning to draw a bird or learning to sculpt something representative out of wire or something like that. That's straightforward. You can get how to use natural history specimens for that type of learning, but it's also a place of jumping off points. So when you surround yourself with a lot of possible muses and inspiration, you start to ask questions, especially when you're around things that are interesting looking, but you don't know all the answers of what it is, where it comes from, how it operates. It really forces your brain to start asking questions. It's along the ways of the way that the Nature Lab is organized without all the labels up front and answers up front. So with that in mind, as an architect, as a landscape architect, as an industrial designer, people come in just to seek inspiration in that main space. And then downstairs in the microscopy lab, we might be looking at finer grain details of, how can we abstract some natural mechanism for the way that the ossicles on a seahorse or a sea star for that matter interlock and add strength. So there's principles that nature can take that we can learn from and apply in different ways. We also have a great reference library of nature related books here. So there's a bunch of different avenues for research for whatever discipline you might be in. So I see students and faculty from all the different departments in here.
Great, thank you. All right. This princess, thank you. The lab is fascinating. And you kind of answered this already, but maybe you have some specific things you can mention. Have any MFA photography students ever done projects in the nature lab?
Yeah, I wish that I had a complete list of all the student projects that have been done here, but it's so many that it's almost impossible. I would say a lot of I've seen a lot of photography students down in the microscopy lab using the advanced imaging equipment in novel ways, or even I've seen a number of students over the years. We have ways of hooking up your own camera that you might be very comfortable with to some of our stereo microscopes. So you can kind of, set a scene at a micro level. And the microscope just becomes your super powered lens. Um, that happens all the time. With the slow motion cameras that we have, people are investigating micro motions. The slow motion cameras are kind of like a microscope for time. So there's a lot of experiment that is just kind of playful and undirected and leads to a new way of thinking and approaching a project. And then there's a lot of very specific, I want to capture how this thing breaks in slow motion when I drop it or something like that. Photography wise, we've also had people set up photo shoots up in the main space as well. There's a student that wants to do a film about a, a ta taxidermy thief. I was just talking to today, so the possibilities are endless.
Right. And I'm just going to do a little plug here. We do have a session tomorrow with the photography department. So this would be a great opportunity to ask the faculty that type of question about the way you can integrate the nature lab with your work here at RISD, if that's what you're interested
Yeah.
in.
Actually, I there's a photography class that's always down here, taking photos of the organisms in the tanks because that's a skill in itself to kind of capture a very differently moving organism.
Right. And then we have one more question here. Are there current biodesign courses for undergrad and graduate students?
There are, and I can't remember what departments they're in, but there is at least one or two biodesign, a studio course and I think it might be more of a lecture course. The answer is yes, but I don't have the exact details at the moment. Sorry.
You may be able to find this information in our course catalog. I don't know how, you know, good the catalog is if you can search biodesign in there, but it's worth taking a look.
Well, one thing I can say is that since 2018, RISD has had a partnership with Hyundai, the car company,
Mhm.
very focused on biodesign. That is the core concept because the company itself wants to improve their entire way of working and designing and making, their entire culture of making. And so at this point in this collaboration, they're actually sponsoring studios I think in spring and fall. So there is one going on. I don't know why I blanked out on that before, but so there is a Hyundai funded studio course that is totally focused on biodesign principles.
That's great. And I just want to share my screen real quick because you can search this in the registrar's course catalog. Um, and this is just on the registrar office website. You can look at the course offerings here. I'm not sure if these look familiar, Benedict, but when I type in biodesign, these are some of the options that come up for,
Yes, I think the second one is the one I was talking about, or
yes.
must be related to.
Oh, industrial design. Yeah,
Yeah, oh, there's the nature lab. Yeah,
perfect. All right.
cool.
Okay, I'll share. All right. So I think that's it, Benedict. If there are no more questions, I think we're going to end early today. Oh, Trey, thank you. I'm so glad you think it is cool stuff. Um, if there's any more questions, feel free to email us at admissions@risd.edu. And again, as Benedict said, the Nature Lab is open to the public if you can come to campus to visit. It is just a great space to visit. It doesn't compare. Unfortunately, the pictures don't do it justice.
So
Um,
true.
yeah,
I was going to say the same thing. And please, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find my contact on the website. But yeah, I wish I could see you all reacting to this, but it really is a something you have to see and experience yourself. So come on by whenever you can.
that's great. Thank you so much for your time, Benedict. Thank you,
My
everybody.
pleasure.
Have a great evening.
See ya.